to get to the Fulton Street station to get that back to Brooklyn. All subways, oh, sorry. So, yeah, I apologize, the resolution. So that's Fulton right there. So I would take, there was subway stations approximately here. I would commute in from Brooklyn to Fulton Street Station every morning, and I always got my bearings as to where to go by turning around and looking up at the Trade Center, the two towers. I always knew, okay, I gotta walk that way. So Fulton Street Station was closed down, everything was locked down. I attempted to go over to Cedar Street, which was walking back this way. This would be, so that's West Side Highway. So I'm going south, and then Cedar is approximately in this area to go see if I can get in to call my family to tell them I was okay, because I couldn't get through on cell phone. There was no cell service whatsoever, and there were emergency workers yelling at you to not tie up the lines. I don't know what that, Chuck, that wouldn't happen today, would it? I mean, yeah, I mean, they were just yelling out, guys, don't tie up the lines, don't tie up the lines, and all these people, all I wanted to do was tell my family that I was okay. So, go over to Cedar Street. Cedar Street is shut down. I'm still determined to get off the island, and I start, can you hear me? I start walking back toward Water Street. And, you know, it was just chaos. A couple of things in addition to the papers that stand is the amount of shoes that people just ran out of their shoes. So there were just these piles of shoes everywhere along the road, which was very odd. So I made my way to get down toward the FDR Drive to get back across Brooklyn Bridge to walk home. I wanted to get home. On my way, evacuating that way, I ran into a colleague from Aon, a guy by the name of John Asatino, and I said, John, I've got to get through to my family. I've got to make phone calls. So we go to Hanover Square, which is, again, in the financial district. I get into an office building there, and I make phone calls. In retrospect, as I was exiting Hanover Square to get back to Brooklyn, I don't think I got a hold of anybody. I don't think I got a hold of you. Yeah. Did I? I did tell you? Okay. I got a hold of my sister. I left a message for my dad, and then I was gone. I'm getting off the island. As I'm exiting Hanover Square, South Tower collapses. And I'm going to fast forward for a second. I didn't know either tower had collapsed. No idea until I got home. Until I got to my sister's apartment. And I just couldn't fathom it. I mean, how were those, what? She said, yeah, they've both fallen. What? I can't imagine. But in retrospect, what I thought was just explosion when I was exiting Hanover Square was the collapse of the South Tower, which was the first one to go, 9:59. So as I'm exiting Hanover Square, 9:59, South Tower collapses. And it sent, you've seen the pictures, the huge plumes of smoke, people covered with ash and debris. It was a very unsafe is an understatement. So I'm heading back to Brooklyn. And the thing is, you know, when I talked to my sister later, she said, yeah, I knew you had called me and said you're okay, but you called me before the tower collapsed, so I didn't know where you were. You could have been down at street level and hit by this debris. I had no idea where you were. So 1028, the North Tower collapses. That happened while I was walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. While I was walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, and here's a shot, this is going back into Brooklyn, F-16 scrambled, and people panicked because they didn't know if they were ours, they didn't know if they were enemies, nobody knew what was going on. So as we're walking back toward the Brooklyn Bridge, the North Tower collapsed, which was 1028. And all of these people that typically wouldn't be in Brooklyn were all going back into Brooklyn. There were 4 or 5 people that just needed to camp out that I let in my apartment. I didn't know who they were. Of course, you're more than welcome to stay here until you can figure out a way. One had to get to Jersey, 3 of them had to get back out to Long Island. Again, everything was shut down. There was no Long Island Railroad service, there was no Metro North, there was nothing. Everything was shut down. So I eventually made my way back into Brooklyn, and I didn't go to my apartment first. I went to my sister's apartment, and we embraced with my brother-in-law. We were very happy to see one another, because again, she had no idea, if I was caught up in the collapse of either one of the towers.
How far was that from when you exited down and got back to the apartment? How far was that?
The walk,
Yep.
it's probably a couple miles, 2.5, 3 miles. Yeah, so that's my story. Does anybody have any questions? I imagine you have. I hope you have questions for me.
Was Henry named after the guy you...
No?
What did she say?
Was Henry named after that guy?
No, but it's fitting. Leslie?
Did you think was happening?
I had heard stories about the 93 bombing, so I thought it could have been another bombing. There was zero communication, zero. The stories that you've heard about the Port Authority coming over the loudspeakers are accurate. In the evacuation process, somebody came over, Port Authority came over and said, something's happened at the North Tower, World Trade Center 1. There's no reason to panic. World Trade Center 2 is not in any danger. Go back to your offices if you see fit. If you see fit. But again, I would be shocked too if I heard it, but you've got to keep in mind that at the time, World Trade, the North Tower, there was debris falling. There were people jumping to their death because they had no other choice. They didn't want to, burn up on the 98th floor, so they were jumping to their death. So they didn't want people walking out of the South Tower and getting hit by debris or people were jumping. I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. It wasn't impossible to fathom that maybe a helicopter had hit the building, maybe a Cessna had hit the building, because again, those towers were so tall that you would consistently see aircraft flying below. Yes, ma'am.
I understand that the attackers actually figured out which floors to hit to have a maximum impact during the collapse. And I did read a book following this. One man that was in charge of security, I think it was for one of the financial institutions in one of the towers, and all of his people got out because they had to have the fire resistance.
I've read a lot about the construction of the towers since, and I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that flying at 650 miles per hour that they would be as accurate as they were accurate, right? But to know precisely where to hit, I don't know. I mean, those, again, it's 1973 technology. When both of the towers were struck, it jarred a lot of the fireproofing that was on those steel girders that made up the infrastructure of both the towers, and that's what caused them ultimately to collapse. I remember it was about a year, I think I have the paper here, but it was a year anniversary, and New York Times did this huge spread on the anniversary, and they had consulted with structural engineers. And I was living in New Jersey at the time, and I remember reading the article that the South Tower should not have withstood impact. It should have collapsed immediately. And I remember reading that and just, openly weeping. It's difficult to fathom this, but it's even more difficult to think that, it should have gone down immediately, and these experts were indicating as much. Nancy.
2.5 weeks after this happened, and walking around Ground Zero, there are no words to describe the eerie feeling, the dust that was still everywhere, the pictures that were posted of people missing. And how did life resume again? What did you do about getting in touch with workers?
So I'll tell you one quick story that happened. I think it was, what did I say? It was the 13th or the 14th when the son of Donna. Yeah. So the broker that, one thing I did want to promise to do was mention their names. So Jennifer Dorsey, who hired me, and Donna Giordano, who was the broker that worked right next to me. So this is like September 13th or 14th, and then the days that followed September 11th, it was, there's a bomb scare in Penn Station, you know, there's a suspicious package in Grand Central, this is shut down, this, you know, we were in fear. Everybody was in fear, and we were reacting in a knee-jerk reaction. It was, you know, I don't blame it, but, so it's about September 14th, and you know, the days and nights that followed were just surreal, just a blur to me. And I didn't sleep for quite a few days afterward. And it was like September 14th, and I felt like I was exhausted, and I was finally gonna get some sleep. And the phone rings at about 10 o'clock, and it's the son of Donna Giordano. His name is Michael Giordano, and he says, "Hey Phil, Michael Giordano, I know you worked with my mom. Have you seen her?" Yeah, I mean, that just threw me. I said, "Michael, I think she was coming in as I was getting to the stairs. Do you know what she was wearing?" "I don't know, Michael." He said, "Well, we're going to go down to St. Vincent's tomorrow because we think that's where everybody thought the patients were going to be, you know, all those trauma, all the trauma departments were all geared up in Jersey City and St. Vincent to take on these hundreds of, and you know, thousands of people, and they just never came." So he said, we're gonna go down to St. Vincent and hopefully we'll identify her. Well, I said, "I'll join you." So you couldn't get back to Manhattan the traditional way. I think I had to go into Queens and then cut across that way. That was the only way to get in. So I get to St. Vincent's. We decided on meeting in a very specific area, and I just couldn't do it because there were just hundreds of people standing. You've all seen the pictures of people standing with pictures of their loved ones, and it was too much for me. And there was no resolution. These people were not getting any resolution. It was very hush. I mean, the folks at St. Vincent's weren't saying anything about patients that were in there, the number of people that were in there. So there was no idea. There was no idea as to where their people were, their loved ones.
You were going to talk about that when you met up with your colleague? Is that just before you got on the bridge?
Yeah, so the way we evacuated down the escalator to go under the mall area, to go back up and evacuate out the North Tower area, I saw the colleague who, his pants were torn, he was bloodied here, and the back of his looked like it was, you know, singed, and he was limping, and I helped him I helped him to the first ambulance I could find. And it wasn't till about, you know, when life did go on, we didn't get back as a company for 2.5, 3 weeks. We didn't get together under the same roof. I mean, it took a long time to get us all back together. And when I finally saw him, he was in a cast. He had a broken leg. We immediately embraced. There was a lot of embracing going on. And he told me his story, and he was one of 2 or 3 people that survived the impact on 78. He was as far away from the impact on 78 as you could be. And that's where the singe came from. And he said, I was jumping basically 3 and 4 stairs at a time. And I look back and I'm like, the timing of that, so he was on 78 at the time of impact and got from 78 to the ground floor in the same time it took me to go from 50 to the ground floor. And stories like that were just, boggling my mind, just the adrenaline people, just took over the flight adrenaline. That was an amazing story that he told me.
My only comment was he made it down that fast with the broken leg.
Yeah, I don't know if the broken leg was caused by him jumping or he had it. I don't know. I mean, I asked him that and he goes, he was like, I don't know. He doesn't remember.
What's your feeling on the memorial?
The memorial at 9/11 Museum? We've been to the memorial twice, and this past Christmas was the first time I've been to the museum. That was tough because there's one section of the museum that has the pictures of every single person that died. It was very tough to see those coworkers again and see their pictures. It just brings you back to the memories you have of each one of them.
Appropriate though to do it.
Yeah.
Do they also display the people, do they display all 2983, the planes and Pentagon?
Yeah. Yeah, they all have an individual section.
How long was it from the time you got out until the towers fell?
So I was trying to, I love the opportunity that this has given me to tell my story, because it helps me to remember. And, Michelle and I have had a lot of conversations about this, and it helps me to recollect and put that day back chronologically. It's cathartic for me. I mean, it helps me to just sort of, on the one hand, if I'm very mechanical about it, and I apologize if I've appeared that way, it helps me to deal with it. It just, the way my brain works, I have to just sort of do it that way. So to answer your question, sorry. I remember when I got out and crossed Vesey and then went to Church Street and turning up and looking to see the huge hole in the side of the North Tower, that somebody said something to the effect of, they got the Pentagon too, or the Pentagon's been hit too. And the Pentagon was hit like 9:37, 9:40, I think, in that neighborhood. And I was probably out of the building at that point by, I don't know, 9:30, 9:32. So 8:46 to 9:32, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. To descend, and my calves were burning. I mean, descending. I can't imagine, God bless the firemen that got up as high as they did, because, my calves were burning. I mean, a lot of things stick out that day. The papers that were everywhere, the smell of the jet fuel that was everywhere, the shoes that I would see, obviously other graphic images, and then, just how much my calves were burning because we descended all those flights of stairs. Go ahead, sorry.
You came out of the first group, they went out on Church Street, but they were the group, they went out by the water thing, were you able to?
By the what now?
Like, if you remember the World Trade on the backside, you know how they got that glass building?
Yeah, that was the World Financial Center,
Back
yep.
there. Was you able to get a hold of anybody that worked with you, they were by the water at all,
By the
Yeah, you know how the building circle on one side of the tower by the bar?
So that's along the West Side Highway?
Yeah.
I didn't evacuate that way at all.
So you didn't come meet with anyone at all, anyone that was back?
I've heard, no, not specifically. I mean, there's the stories, again, that gentleman that I saw in the evacuation process that I helped to the ambulance, that was, nothing. So there's a story that's featured in this book, 102 Minutes. That's the 102 minutes from the impact of the first, to the collapse of the second tower. The North Tower went second. The 102-minute span in between, there's a book called 102 Minutes put out by the New York Times. So a colleague of mine is featured in there, and his story was that he was one of those individuals that was on the 78th floor and got into one of the express elevators down on the 78th floor, and at the time of impact, he had just gotten into the elevator free fell 78 stories. He was one of, I think, two, because those elevators were pretty big, they could hold 25, 30 people, and he was one of two that survived the elevator, and his story is just amazing.
Slide where he slid down, he was just stuck on a spear, and he was falling on the sharp metal and all that.
Yeah, I mean,
Stuck there.
well, I don't know,
That was the miracle guy or somebody. He was in the
his name is Alan Mann.
elevator, or was he in the stairwell?
No, he was in the elevator, yeah, and it free fell. So his story is amazing, and it was like 3 weeks after, and we had this meeting with two very powerful private equity guys at lunch, and it's myself, Alan, and these two guys, and we're trying to get their business and do business with them, and these guys are just, very buttoned up in suits, powerful guys. Alan tells his story, and these guys are just full on weeping, and just there was a lot of that was going on after 9/11.
I was wondering, when you said, and when the first plane hit, and your boss immediately said...
Get to the stairs.
Yeah. So if most people thought it's a bomb, or maybe a Cessna or something, do you ever know why would...
He is...
In this totally different building, would he suddenly think, we need to...
I think he had been through the 93 and had experience with it. Or saw something that we didn't see. I mean, and that's the amazing thing about that day is, and that was the confusion for me too, is the people that were getting on the stairs in such panic, what do they know that I don't know?
Right.
Because for me, it was, I don't know, it was just a bomb that went off, and I don't mean to treat that lightly, but I could never in a million years guess that it was a 747 doing 600 miles per hour into the side of the building. Maybe he saw something that I didn't see. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm glad he told me to get my butt to the stairs.
Bill, number one, thank you for the story.
Sure.
And I hope it is lucrative for you to
Thank you.
know there is a reason for your survival.
Yes.
Thank God for that. I worked on Wall Street back in the late 60s, and I would avoid, when you talk about the thousands of people, I would avoid the people during my lunch break and go to Trinity Church and read a book.
Yeah.
Now, when I went back to New York, my cousin went with me, and we were taking the train. He's not a walker. He kept saying, we'll take the train. There is no train. So we had to walk, and we passed St. Paul, and of course, Trinity. And the dust and the two things that stand out. I saw the sign that said, "We forgive, but we'll never forget," and they took down the "never forget." That the one stayed up about forgiveness, which was so. I remember that on the street, and I understand that's in the museum. I might just say one more thing.
I was never got angry. I was angry because I lost my friends and my colleagues. I never directed my anger at someone or some ideology, or I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that God softened my heart. I never, I don't know, I guess my mom, thank you for bringing me up that way, I don't know.
And the other thing that was so outstanding in my mind, walking past these churches that George Washington
Francis Davern.
in St. Paul and the pew there is there, not a crack, any of the stained glass in St. Paul or Trinity.
Yeah.
And I said, God was with us at the time to build personal character, to be able to survive. However, individuals survived that day. I was on the telephone with my niece. And she's telling me that the smoke was going into Brooklyn. I said, you've got to hang up the phone.
Right.
I said, they're trying to come out. No, I've got to get my kids. I said, they're fine, they're in school. No, they were releasing the kids from school. Where were the kids going?
Yeah.
But again, the madness. And then those who persevered, those who had an innate spirit to help each other, to keep moving.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line, is with God's grace.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, look, I mean, New Yorkers are not known to be the the kindest. We all have chips on our shoulder. We're all very suspicious and standoffish, and it's all valid. But subsequent to 9/11, I mean, you know, there were people, you know, one of the tips to people I give that they go up to New York and they go, well, tell me about New York. And well, when you're on the subway, don't ever make eye contact with anybody and don't carry on a conversation. Subsequent to 9/11, it was like, you know, it was a cocktail party. I mean, people were really coffee clutches on the subway in New Jersey Transit. It was amazing. It's amazing.
How has this changed?
I mean, initially, it made me, I'm going to tell you, my initial emotional knee-jerk reaction was to be much more guarded, right? I mean, that was just the human nature, to be much more guarded and suspicious. And, you know, I was living in New Jersey and taking New Jersey Transit and going underneath the Hudson River every day. And my mind went to, oh my gosh, what could happen? I was profiling everybody. Everybody was suspicious to me. And I was immediately jaded. It took me a number of years to come to peace and come to terms with the fact that I'm here, and certainly it softened me. I mean, how could it not? I mean, it's given me great perspective. You know, it took me a number of years to realize my blessings and my beautiful wife and my kids. I don't know where they are, but I mean, it's as best as I can articulate right now. Yeah. There's some stuff up here that might be of interest to you guys. I saved a bunch of papers subsequent to 11 that you might be interested in looking at. There's some other stuff. Yeah, it was a voting day, so I've got the actual, and this is the very bag that I wore coming out of, I did grab my briefcase. I was, you know, conscientious worker. I wanted to make sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For sharing
Appreciate it.
Such a
Thanks for the opportunity.
Emotional, personal story. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Do you want to introduce your family that's here tonight?
My mom, Brenda Lana, is here.
Thank you for being here.
And of course, my wife, Michelle. Thanks.